Okay. Welcome to my lecture on servlets. So servlet is one technology which are used to develop web applications. And of course, we use Java for the development of servlet. And servlet is a special program. It is not a standalone program. It is a special program. It resides in a web server. It resides in a web server. Okay. And it executes in web server. After the execution, it gives a program. Otherwise, it gives a response. Generally, another program has a response. And that response will be given to the client. So what happens is servlet will be maintained in a server. Okay. And that servlet will be requested by a client. And servlet uses server client technology. In server client technology, client will request the server for the resources of the server. Now, server will give the response to the client. In the case of servlet, the requested servlet will be executed. And the output of that servlet will be sent as response. In general, we have different types of servlets. There is a generic servlet as well as HTTP servlet. If it is HTTP servlet, then a HTML program will be generated by servlet and it will be given to the client, so that client will execute that HTML program within his or her web browser, and they will see the output over there in the web browser. So in real time, we may request a servlet in order to browse a web page. We may not know all those details, but in the background, when you request, that request may go to a servlet and a response, HTML program as a response will come to you, to your system, and your system's web browser will show a web page, which is the output of the HTML program, which is executed in the web browser. And that HTML program was generated in the server after the execution of servlet. Okay. And so web server, it holds so many things. Within web server, so many things will be there. One is servlet. So that web server will communicate with the servlet. Okay. So that servlet will be within one web application, for suppose web app. Okay, it will identify that servlet and it will communicate with that servlet. Then that servlet will generate a dynamic page. That is what, after the execution of the servlet, it will create an HTML page. It is dynamic. Dynamic means it will be keep on changing the content. Static means always the same content. Okay. So it creates a dynamic page and it will give to the server. That server will give the response to the client. Okay. So that is about servlet. Okay. And in this document, there are details about CGI. CGI, it is a old technology. That's why no need of bothering about that. In examinations also, they may not ask, but have an idea that is nothing but it is an old technology prior to servlet technology. And for every request, they will create a CGI shell. Okay. And as the processor as the number of requests increases, the load on the processor will increase. Those are some disadvantages. Okay. So now, of course, when you see the advantages of servlets, okay, less response time, means what, very fast it will execute, because each request runs in a separate thread. No need of creating a separate process or a separate CGI shell in servlet. Multi-threading is used. A separate thread will be created, Okay, thread is a lightweight process, so response time is very less, means what, very fast it will respond, and easily scalable. You can increase the code just like that without any problem. And those are robust as well as object oriented and platform independent. All these are advantages. Platform independent in the sense wherever you want you can execute servlet. In whichever server you want you can execute the servlet. Okay. So when you come to the execution of the servlet, what happens is if the request increases also, no problem. There will be very less load on the processor, because they are not creating another process for each request. They are not creating another process for each request. They are creating a thread for each request. Thread is also like a process, but it is not heavy. Means all the things which are needed for the execution of process are not present in thread. Very few things will be maintained. So because of that, the load on the processor will be very less. Because of that, it will be very fast. Means what, very less response time it will take. Very fast it will respond. So that is about introduction to Servlet. So again, I'm telling Servlet is a Java program. Servlet resides in a web server. You cannot execute servlet just like a normal Java program. You have to install a server. Within that server, you have to deploy the servlet in one standard environment. Then only you can execute servlet within a web server. That too, that servlet will be executed whenever the user requests the servlet through network or through internet. Okay, and generally we use servlet in order to render HTML pages to the client, and the servlet can be used to generate a HTML page dynamically, so that the content of the HTML page can be changed dynamically. Okay, it will not be static. However you want like that, you can generate the HTML based upon the request. Those are all the advantages of servlet. And in Java, they gave a collection of classes and interfaces for Servlet technology. And those classes and interfaces are packaged into two different packages. One is Java X.Servlet, another one is Java X.Servlet.HTTP. In examination, they may ask a question here. Okay, please explain the classes and interfaces that belongs to Servlet as well as Servlet.HTTP. So you should have an idea about what and all classes, what and all interfaces are available in Servlet API, and what are their use. This is one of the important questions, because if you know these things, then only you are able to write a program in Servlet. So that's why this is important one. Our whole unit deals with these classes and interfaces only. Each class will be used for a special purpose. Okay, whatever operations we do, all those we do by using these classes and interfaces only. Okay, and I said there is a generic servlet as well as HTTP servlet. Generic servlet in the sense that can be used for any kind of protocol. HTTP servlet is nothing but it is used for HTTP protocol. There is nothing but generic means it can be used anywhere. Anywhere we can use. There is no specific protocol for that. Send the request, get the response. What you are sending as a request, what you are getting as a response, it is your choice. Whereas in HTTP, it is not like that. You have to send the request and HTTP request, and the response also a HTTP response. HTTP packets will be used. HTTP packet structure will be used. Okay, that is based upon the protocol HTTP, and ours is web technologies. In web technologies, we will be using HTTP package. Okay, and these are all the classes and interfaces. Okay, you have to go through all these things, and you have to remember at least the important classes. For suppose if you look at important interfaces, for suppose servlet. Servlet is an interface. So if you want to create your own servlet, you have to create a class. That class should implement this servlet interface, so that servlet features will be obtained into your class, so that your class will become a servlet. Okay, servlet context, it is nothing but it will give some information about the servlet. And then servlet config, some configuration related things. Of course, there is little difference between servlet context and config. You will see those two. And each request and response will be in the form of objects. Okay, ours is this servlet is Java. Servlet is using Java programming language. Java is a purely object-oriented programming language, and purely object-oriented programming language, everything should be in terms of object. So we refer the request of the servlet by the means of an object for the class, which is implemented by implementing servlet request. Of course, it will be provided by the server. No need to worry about that. Servlet request and servlet response objects will be created by web server, and those objects will be given to us. Those objects will be given to the servlet. So within the servlet, if you want to access the request, if you want to put something in the response, apart from the basic stuff, then you have to make use of the servlet request and servlet response objects. That is nothing but these two are interfaces. These two interfaces are those will be implemented in a class, and for that class they will create an object, and that object will be given to you. Okay, and context listener is nothing but related to event handling request dispatcher. That's nothing but it is used to dispatch the request. A request will come. We have to send the request to different programs in our website. So to which program this request has to be dispatched, that can be decided within your servlet with the help of request dispatcher. Then a single thread model, you can ignore this. And filters, that's nothing, filters are nothing but whenever a request comes, we can filter that request, and with the help of request dispatcher, we can perform some manipulations over there. Okay, so we will see all those things. Okay, so important interfaces are servlet context, servlet config, servlet request, servlet response, request dispatcher, and filters. Okay, then classes. In order to refer the input stream as well as output stream for the servlet, there are two classes: servlet input stream and servlet output streams. By using input stream, we deal with input to the servlet. By using output stream, we deal with output for the servlet. And request wrapper, response wrapper, I think you can ignore these two. Those are not that much important. And servlet exception. Servlet exception is one class. Whenever there is a runtime error in servlet, generally it throws either a servlet exception object, otherwise unavailable exception object. And then the important main class is generic servlet. If you want to create a servlet, you have to create a class, and that class should hold the features of a servlet. Okay, so the basic features of a servlet are already defined in generic servlet. So what you have to do is you have to inherit it. When you inherit generic servlet into your own class, then your class will become a servlet, and within that you write the things whatever you want. Okay, so your a servlet will come by inheriting generic servlet, and remaining things and all can be added by you, whatever extra things you want. So let's move down. And HTTP. In HTTP, we have a few classes and interfaces. HTTP servlet. Earlier we have seen servlet interface as well as generic servlet. Those two can be used for the creation of a servlet. Along with that, suppose if you want to create a HTTP servlet, then you can make use of this HTTP servlet. You have to extend this HTTP servlet, and your class will become, means inherit HTTP servlet, so that your class will become a HTTP servlet, and remaining things and all can be added. Likewise, we create a servlet. Similarly, for a request, and response. HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response. Earlier, it was like this: servlet request and servlet response. Servlet request and servlet response. But here, along with servlet request and response, they added HTTP because same features, but by using HTTP protocol. Okay, and cookie is one more thing what we use here. So in HTTP we use cookie. Okay, those things we will discuss what those are. Okay, now in a servlet, I said there are two things in Java X.Servlet package. One is servlet interface, servlet interface. Another one is generic servlet class. Class is one concept, interface is another concept. Okay, generic servlet is the name and servlet is the name. Okay, now you can create a servlet in Java X.Servlet by using the classes and interfaces that are provided in Java X. Servlet package. Okay, and in that, okay, one method is by implementing the interface servlet. Okay, if it is an interface, then there will be only method declarations. There will not be body for those methods. So you have to implement this interface in a class, in your class, and in that class you have to override all its methods. You have to override all its methods. Okay, the important methods are service, init, and destroy. And these three methods are also called lifecycle methods. These three methods are also called lifecycle methods because these methods will be called automatically by the web server. Okay, when the servlet is created, otherwise when the servlet is initially started, init will be executed. It will be executed only once through the lifetime of the servlet. Okay, and before the elimination or removing the servlet from the server, destroy will be executed automatically. At the starting, init only once. At the ending, destroy only once. So if you want to perform any operation before the clearance of servlet from the memory, you have to write in destroy. If you want to execute any operation which is to be executed only once, that too at the starting initial state of servlet, you have to write in init. Okay, and for every request, service method will be called. For every request, service method will be called. That's it. Init and destroy will be executed only once throughout the life cycle of the servlet, whereas service will be executed for every request. And that service will accept servlet request and servlet response as arguments. And who will pass these servlet request and response arguments? Web server. Web server will pass these arguments. Web server will call the service method by passing the request object and response object. There's nothing but web server will take the request of the request made by the user, and it will convert that one into an object, and that object will be passed to the service method. And again, it will pass the object response also, so that we can put something in the response, so that that particular servlet response object will be used by the web server to send the response. Okay, and some non-life cycle methods like servlet config, servlet info, get servlet config, and get servlet info are few methods which we use within our servlet, which belongs to the servlet interface. So these are the methods which we will use in our class, and those methods are from servlet interface. Those methods are in declaration. You have to provide the definition for those methods. Okay, so likewise you create a servlet. Okay, so one is by implementing the servlet interface, and the second one is by extending the generic servlet. Okay, generic servlet is an abstract class. Abstract class is nothing but it has generally a class has variables as well as methods, but of course in general every method should be with the definition. But in abstract class, some of the methods, not every method, some of the methods are without a definition. We call those methods as abstract methods. If any abstract method is present in the class, then that class should be considered as abstract class. You cannot create an object for abstract class, okay, until the full definition of the class is obtained. Okay, if you define the full definition, then only you can create an object for the abstract class. So generally what happens is they will give everything which is required for the servlet, but they will not give the information about few things like init, destroy, and service. For those three methods, they will not give the definition because that should be given by you. Okay, remaining things they can give like that it is. So within this generic servlet, most of the methods are defined, but some of the methods are not at defined. Who has to define? You has to define. When you are creating a servlet, you can create that servlet by extending generic servlet and by overriding their, it's abstract methods. It's abstract methods like init, destroy, and service. Okay, of course that init and destroy you have to override, but the main method which is abstract is service, because they can't tell what operation we require. So simply they will give the structure, they will not give the definition, they will give only the declaration. So you have to provide the definition so that the full definition for your servlet will be obtained. Okay, so there is again init here, it is a normal method, service method, but of course here it is that service method is abstract, and then a normal destroy method. So you have to override the destroyed method if you require. You have to override the init method if it is required, but you have to implement service method because it is abstract. Okay, and then some other methods like if you want to get the configuration details, servlet info, if you want to get the object for context, if you want to get the object of config. Okay, see, config and context are details only, details about servlet, but one is bound to servlet, another one is related to the entire website. Okay, that is the difference between config and context. We will see that one. And in the request there will be parameters. But suppose we are registering ourselves in Gmail. We are registering ourselves in Gmail. So we will open registration page. We will give some details and click on submit, and those details has to be sent to the server. Now within the server, they have to read the details. Which details? Form details. So the form details can be read by using get init parameter method. That's what the point here. Okay, so within the servlet, we are going to read the form data by the help of get init parameter. This is one of the another important concept. Okay, they may ask a question on this in examination. Write a program to read form data within the servlet by using that's it. Within the servlet, they make you the question like that. At the time, we have to explain about this one. Get init parameter, otherwise get parameter. Okay, we have get init parameter. That's nothing but it is related to initialization, and there is one more method called get parameter. Okay, we have two things. One is get init parameter. This is not for form data reading. This is for init parameters. In init, we can take few parameters. Those parameters you can read, and if you don't know the names, those names can be obtained. Okay, and servlet name can be obtained. If you want to write the information in log file, you can use these two methods, and you can write in the log file. Okay, and we have another method that is nothing but get parameter. We will see those things in example. Okay, and then HTTP servlet class. See, these are the three ways of creating a servlet. First one is by implementing servlet interface. Second one is by extending generic servlet class, And the third one is by extending HTTP servlet class. See, this HTTP servlet is created either by implementing a servlet interface or by extending a generic servlet class. Okay, they created this HTTP servlet by extending the existing generic servlet class and by incorporating HTTP protocol within this class. That's what the point here. Okay, and see here, that structure is given here. See, so this is important. Now, when you take HTTP servlet request, this is one interface in javax.servlet.http package, and that interface is created by extending servlet request. Similarly, HTTP servlet response is created by extending existing servlet response. Okay. Similarly, when we come to HTTP servlet, they obtain that one by implementing servlet interface. Okay. Now, what we have to do is we are creating our own servlet. By defining a class, we will create our own servlet. For suppose our own servlet name is my servlet. This my servlet should extend. Okay, should extend. So the solid line is extends. The dotted line is implements. Okay, so extends is nothing but inheriting a class. Implements nothing but implementing an interface. Okay, servlet is an interface that is implemented in a HTTP servlet class. That HTTP servlet class is extended in my servlet. The concept here is all the methods and variables of the HTTP servlet class are present in my servlet. So what happens? My servlet has become a servlet because if a class has all the features related to servlet, then your class that particular class will become a servlet. Okay, that is the concept here. So that is the use of inheriting existing classes. All the features of existing class will be obtained in the new class, so that new class will become like an existing class, and the new features can be added in the new class. Okay, so that along with the existing features, a new features will come to that. Okay, and of course we have a service method. Okay, we have seen service method. That service method is modified to do get or do post. That's nothing but in HTTP servlet, in the place of service method, you are supposed to override do get or do post methods. And which method to override is depending upon the type of the method. That's nothing but in forms we discussed one point. That's nothing but there will be method of sending the form data. Though there are two methods. One method is get method, another one is post method. If the method of submitting, otherwise getting the form data is get, then you have to override do get. If the method of getting the form data is post, then you have to override do post. So either of them should be used, either of them, but not the both. Either of them should be used in the place of service method. This is in case of HTTP servlet. And so if you are creating an HTTP servlet, you are extending the existing class HTTP servlet. Okay, and your servlet will become, your class will become a HTTP servlet, and within that you are supposed to override the methods of HTTP servlet. That's nothing but do get or do post. Okay, so likewise we can create a servlet in 3 different ways. Okay, and of course there will be a web container. That web container will manage the execution of servlets, JSP for Java Enterprise Edition applications, Java EE applications. Those that information is that. Okay, let us look at this how a servlet works. Okay, generally initially client will request a web page. Okay, so when he is requesting a web page, it is a get method. Okay, we receive a request with get as method, and that request will be given to the web container. which is present in the server. Okay, now what happens? Okay, that web container will create request and response objects, and afterwards, okay, it will identify which servlet to be executed, and for that servlet they will create a thread, and to that thread that request will be sent by calling service method of the servlet, and while calling the service method it will pass request and response objects. Which one will pass? Container. Okay, and then that particular servlet will execute that particular request. I mean, the servlet will be executed and it will process that request, and after processing that request, it will generate a response, and that response will be given to the container. Now the container will send the response. After it sends the response, the request object and response object as well as the thread for the servlet will be destroyed. Okay, so that is about how a servlet works. Okay, so client request, and that will be given to web container, and web container will create objects for request and response, and it will create a thread for servlet. It will call the service method or do get method or do post method based upon the class, how you implemented that, based upon how you implemented the servlet. If you created a servlet by using HTTP servlet, then they will call do get or do post. If you create servlet by using generic servlet or a servlet interface, they may call service. Of course, initially they will call the service method. That service method in turn may call do get or do post methods. So what happens is, in order to process that request, service method or do get or do post method, any of them will be called, and response will be generated, and that response will be in terms of object, and that object will be sent as a response to the client, and after sending the response to the client, that request object, response object, and the thread for the servlet, everything will be destroyed. So that is how a servlet works. Okay, and then servlet lifecycle. Okay, servlet lifecycle is nothing but there are states, different states for servlet. First one is initially we load the servlet class in our web container, otherwise within the web server. That is one state. Okay, we will load that one. As soon as we load that one, it will create an instance for that, object for that. Which one? Who will create? Web container will create. When they create an object, instance is nothing but object. Instance is nothing but object. Okay, and once the object is created, init method of the object will be called automatically. See, request is not yet received, but before the request, init method will be called. So all the initial operations which are required for the servlet will be executed over here in the init method. Then the servlet will move to the ready state. In the ready state, it will be waiting for the request. When the request comes, service method will be executed. If another request comes, another time service method will be executed. If there are 10 requests, for those 10 requests, 10 threads will be created. In those 10 threads, there will be 10 service methods. Those 10 service methods will be executed, and 10 responses will be generated. And those 10 responses will be given to 10 different clients who requested. Okay, that is the process. Okay, after some time, we may change the content of the servlet. Otherwise, I don't want this servlet. I want some other program to be included. I have to remove the servlet. Otherwise, I will be updating. Because of that, what will happen is servlet should be removed from the memory. Okay, when it has to be removed from the memory, that's nothing but clearing the servlet from the memory. So destroy will be called. Okay, destroy will be called. At the time, you can do all the final steps which are to be done for the servlet. For suppose if the servlet is using any resource, you can close all the resources, something like that, and then that servlet will be removed from the memory. Okay, so like that the life cycle. So those are all and main thing is in this there are few methods. Okay, one is init method. Init method will be called automatically. Okay, and init method accepts when you are overriding init method in your servlet class, you are supposed to write like this: public void init. You have to remember these points. Okay, public void as it is. When you are writing the code as it is, you are supposed to write public void init, and it accepts servlet config object. Config is the name of the object. That's it. And throws servlet exception. There is nothing but runtime error. And then service method. Okay, service method also called automatically. It is also one of the lifecycle method. Init method is lifecycle method, automatically called. Service method is also lifecycle method, automatically called. And service method will accept the servlet request object, servlet response object. And of course, it throws servlet exception as well as IO exception. And the third method in lifecycle is destroy. And for destroy, there will be public void destroy and no arguments. I think they haven't specified any declaration for that, but it is like this: public void destroy and no arguments. Likewise, you can override destroy, so that those three methods will be called at three different states of servlet, but all the time service method will be called for every request processing. And another one is we have to place the servlet within a server. We have to place the servlet within a server. You cannot execute a servlet just like a normal program. So for that, we require, there are so many servers, and some of the servers are for cost, and some of the servers are for free of cost from open source. And one such type of software is Apache Tomcat server. Apache is the corporation organization who developed which developed so many open source softwares. In those, one of the software is Apache Tomcat server. Apache Tomcat server. You can download that one for free of cost. Okay. Now you can execute servlet as well as JSP within, along with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can execute servlet as well as JSP within that server. Okay, and when you are deploying, otherwise when you are creating a website, what we have to do? I want to create a website. In that website, there are HTML pages, CSS pages, JavaScript pages, servlet pages, as well as JSP pages. Everything will be there, and all those files should be placed in one order. You cannot place them just like that. Okay, a structure should be maintained. That is what the first point. Create directory structure for your applications. All the Java classes in one folder. Java classes in the sense the compiled ones. You have to compile the server. You'll write a Java program by using any text editor, and after that you compile that one. I mean, Java program in the sense servlet program. After that, you have to compile that one. Once you compile that one, it will create a dot class file, and that dot class file you have to place in your website. Okay, no need of .java. Some people, they will keep Java .java programs also, but the compiled Java programs should be placed inside the website, so that that compiled code it will take and it will execute it. Okay, then that's what: create a servlet, compile the servlet, and then create a deployment descriptor. Deployment descriptor is one file. It is XML file. That is the reason we studied XML earlier. Okay. In XML, what we will do, we will describe the data. Here also we will describe the web page. Sorry, not web page, website. Entire website, how that website is. Okay. If a request comes with one URL, then which servlet has to be executed, and what is the class name for that particular servlet, and what are init parameters for that particular servlet. Likewise, so many things we will describe, we will place in a deployment descriptor XML file. That name is web, that file name is web.xml, web.xml. In examination, they may ask about web.xml. Otherwise, they may ask about deployment descriptor. Please explain the tags that are provided in deployment descriptor. You have to explain. Then nothing is a very few tags are there. Those tags has a specific meaning. You have to explain this tag is available for this particular purpose, and then one small program for that web.xml. Then you get full marks for that. Okay. Now, the thing is, when you are trying to create a website, so you create a HTML, CSS, JavaScript programs. Along with that, we create a Servlet class for that the Servlet class has to be compiled, and that compiled Servlet class along with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript should be placed in a structure given by Apache Tomcat. We have to place those files according to that structure, and we have to describe everything in web.xml. Okay, and then you have to start the server. Okay, so after putting all the files in a proper structure and explaining that one in web.xml, then you start the server. After starting the server, a client can request the website, and the client will get the response. Otherwise, client cannot access your website. Okay, now the structure. First one is the directory structure. Suppose your web application name is first. Your web application name is first. Okay, and within your web application, okay, you are supposed to place web.inf. See, first is a folder. Okay, web.inf is another folder. Okay, so web.inf you can remember like this: web information. Okay, to remember. Okay, and along with web.inf, you can place any HTML program or any JSP file, no problem. Otherwise, any static resources like CSS files, JavaScript file, or image file, anything you can keep directly within your folder, which is given for your web application or website. Okay, but in web.inf, what you have to place is, first one is the library. Okay, the existing code, and then for suppose Servlet library, JSP related library. There will be library. There are few packages for Servlet, right? JavaX.servlet, JavaX.servlet.html. Those are all under some jar files. Those jar files can be placed inside library. And web.xml. This is an XML file which describes your website. And classes folder. See, first is your web application name, and it is a folder. In that folder, HTML and JSP files along with some static resources. Along with these two, there is one more folder, capital letters, web-inf. In this web-inf, we are going to place the library related stuff as well as web.xml file, and one folder. This is important, classes. This is important for our Servlet. In classes folder, you are supposed to place the compiled Servlet file. That's nothing but for suppose if you create a program, my Servlet, name of the program should be myservlet.java. But after the compilation, it will create one more program, one more file. That's nothing but name of the class dot class. Name of the class dot class. Name of the class is myservlet dot class. So this is the compiled code of your Servlet. So the compiled Servlet class files should be placed under classes. Okay. So this is the directory structure in Apache Tomcat web server. Okay. The same things are explained here. And so when you are creating a Servlet, you can create that Servlet in 3 different ways, as I explained earlier. Okay. One is by implementing Servlet interface, because Servlet is an interface. Interface has only declarations. You have to define all its methods. By extending generic Servlet, it is an abstract class. In the abstract class, some of the methods, not some of the methods, only one method, that is nothing but service method, is abstract. So that should be at any cost implemented in your class. And the remaining, if you want, you can override, otherwise you can omit, no problem. Another approach is by extending the Servlet, HTTP Servlet class. In these 3 ways, you can create your Servlet. So main thing is, within your Servlet, you have to override service method. You have to implement service method when you use the first 2 approaches. When you use the third approach, you have to override or implement do get or do post methods. Any of them you have to override. Okay, let us go through one small example. This is again important. Whenever a question is asked, otherwise whenever they ask you to write a program in Servlet, they may not ask big questions. They may ask small questions, because the basics you should know at least. The basics you should know at least. That's why in this class, let us in this program, what and all things are there. See, whatever you see here, the same code we will write in every program related to Servlet, except the content. Okay, except this highlighted one. Remaining things for every Servlet program you have to write them. So whenever you see question related to Servlet program, if you have to write a Servlet program, you better write a Servlet program. Whether they ask or not, better to write a Servlet program. When you are writing a Servlet program, remember this. First, you have to import the packages. I said there are packages Java x.servlet and Java x.servlet.http. Okay, so when you have to import them, so that's why the keyword import in small letters space Java x.servlet. It is the name of the package, but you need all the classes from that package. So dot star refers all and semicolon. Similarly, the other package. And of course, here we have to deal with input and output also. That is the reason we are importing. We have to import java.io.star also. Okay, so this is about import. And the second one is now you are creating a servlet. How to create a servlet? By creating a class. Okay, and in this document there is a small mistake. That mistake is after public you are supposed to write class. They haven't write that class. Okay, you have to write public class, name of the class. What is the name of the class? My servlet. Then extends HTTP servlet. So I will let me show that one in a notepad. Okay, so you have to write the class like this. Of course, import statement should be there. Afterwards, public class for suppose my servlet. My servlet is my own servlet class. And then you have to write extends. Okay, here we are creating the servlet by extending HTTP servlet, by extending the HTTP servlet. That's why we are writing HTTP servlet. But suppose if you are using generic servlet, then you have to write extends generic servlet. But suppose if you are using servlet, so it is an interface. If it is interface, you have to write implements. Okay, like that it is. So don't worry about all the three different ways. You just concentrate on simply write like this: public class, name of the servlet, extends HTTP servlet. It is fine. Because ours is web technologies, we may not use generic servlet all the times. We always use HTTP servlet, so you can write like this, no problem. And then within that you have to write either do get or do post. Any of one method you have to write. And its arguments. See, it is public and it is void. Return type is void. Name is do get, and it accepts HTTP servlet request object, HTTP servlet response object. If it is a generic servlet, it will be servlet request and servlet response. And it throws, you have to write this one for exception handling, throws servlet exception. Then the remaining content in the servlet. Okay, so this structure you have to remember. Everybody should remember this one. Okay, whenever they ask any question on servlet, if you don't know that question also, at least write this program and try to explain this program. You may get a few marks. Okay, if you are unable to write the answer correctly, at least you can do like this also. Okay, so this structure is should be used for almost all the programs in Servlet. Okay, then within the body of the do get method, what we are doing? We are taking the response object. Within the response object, there is a method called set content type. Set content type. Okay, so there's nothing but we have to tell about what is the content of the response. What is the type of the content of the response? That's nothing but it is a text, and that too for HTML. So text by HTML. This is you have to write for every servlet almost. Okay, then from the response we are getting the writer. Writer is nothing but it is the output object. It is an output object. By using this, we write something into where? Into the response. So if you want to write something, if you want to add something into the response of the servlet, then you have to get the output stream of the servlet, and by using that output stream, you write something into it. So that's why we are getting the output stream of the servlet by calling getWriter, and that object, it will return an object. That object is stored inside an object reference variable of type printWriter. Okay, again you have to write for all the servlets, you have to write the first two statements. Okay, you can, if you are unable to understand also no problem, but better to by heart it and write it. Okay, write it. Okay, you here the concept is you are getting the output stream object of the response. By getting the output stream object, you can write something into the response. So whatever you write in the response, that only will be given to the client. So we are writing in the response by calling a println method of that particular object. Out is the output stream object for the response. Okay, now servlet response. So by using that, its method, one of the methods, generally we use this only, println. Okay, so whatever you write within the parenthesis, whatever you pass as an argument for println, that will be kept inside the response. So an HTML program we are placing inside the response. A HTML program is placed in the response. So a HTML program is generated here, and that program will be given to the client. And you can generate the HTML program however you want. You can use CSS, you can use JavaScript, you can use H1, H2, paragraph, image, everything you can use. But here it is a small example. That's why they have taken only HTML body directly. They haven't taken the head and the title. And within the body, there is one H1. So it says hello readers, and close the body and close the HTML. That's a small servlet program. Okay, so please go through this. Everybody has to remember this program, because they may ask a question like please write a servlet which shows a welcome message. So the same approach, in the place of hello readers, you can write welcome to servlet. Okay, fine. Now of course this is practical approach. This practical approach may not be required to you because you don't have a practical session. That's why this is about compiling a servlet. I said you have to compile a servlet. So for that, what and all we have to do, those points are explained here. You can skip this. You can skip this. No need to read this. Okay, and another one is deployment descriptor. What is deployment descriptor? It describes about the deployment of the files within our website into the web server. We are deploying our website into web server. Okay, that deployment related description will be given inside deployment descriptor. It is an XML file. So starting of every XML file should be processing instruction. So there will be a processing instruction, first line of XML document. And then we are supposed to write the root to node. The root to node is web-app. Of course, this version, XML and XSI, all these are not necessary. You can skip that while writing in examination, because in IDE, automatically it will give everything. We know all these things. What are these? It is about XML schema as well. It is telling about XML schema. Okay, which XML schema is used for web.xml. It is providing that reference. Okay, you can skip this, no problem, because it is not that much important. You just write web app and close it. No need to write the version also. Okay, no need to write the version also. Write web app and close this, and this will be generated automatically within the IDEs like Eclipse, NetBeans, and all those things. Okay, no need to remember this. No need to give much importance for this. Even in examinations, also no need to write those. Only write web app, node, and then important two tags: servlet tag and servlet name. Okay, in servlet it will tell about the details about the servlet. There's nothing but there will be a name for the servlet and name of the class file. Name of the class file is my servlet.class. So here you are supposed to write my servlet, and for that you can give a name, normal name, that is hello. Now there will be mapping. Mapping is nothing but user will request our servlet by using, for suppose, /hello. Whatever you give, using that they will use that name in the URL of the request. Okay, for suppose www.gmail.com/register. slash register. If that is a request, then the servlet to be executed is name of the servlet. So for this name, again, there will be the class file. So for this particular request, this is the servlet to be executed. So execute that one. So that those details are provided. I think you understood this concept. Nothing but what is the URL for the servlet in the request. Okay, and what is the name for the servlet which is to be executed when this URL comes as a request. And for this servlet name, what is the name of the servlet class? Okay, so it looks for web server or web container will look for a servlet in classes folder, and it looks for my servlet in classes folder. In Apache Tomcat web server, in classes folder, it will look for a servlet with name my servlet. Okay, likewise the servlet will be identified and it will be executed. So there are so many things, but I think for you those are all not required. This is the basic stuff which is to be known to you. Okay, in examination also, if you explain this one, it is sufficient. Okay, then other one is a practical approach, how to start the server and how to set up that environment, and how to run the servlet, and what will be the output. Here is the output. So they are requesting like this. Localhost. You see here they are not deploying that one in a real time. That's why the same computer is the server, same computer is the client. So to refer, it is the same computer, the local host. Host means a computer. Local host means the same computer. Colon 8080 is the port number that is used for this Apache Tomcat web server. And slash, you can change it. By default, it will be 8080. Slash, name of the application. First is the name of the application. Slash, hello is the URL of the servlet. When hello comes, it will go for, it will check servlet name. By taking the servlet name, it will check the class name. By taking the class name, it will go to classes folder and it will execute the class file. Okay. So this is actually, this is the introduction about the servlet. Okay. In the next class, we will complete the remaining things like what is servlet request, what is servlet response, how to read the parameters, how to manage the session, what is the difference between servlet config and servlet context. I think in the next class we can complete servlets. Okay, thank you for this.